What's up, guys? All good? We're here for another review on the channel, but first, don't forget to hit that like button. And without further ado, let's get into the video. The story is about a boy named Manhwa, who became a test subject for an immortality experiment. This boy, in turn, managed to achieve immortality because he was granted a divine power by an incredibly strong being. This being then told him that he must fulfill the mission given to him, to become the strongest of that era, and to acquire all the martial arts from every master of that time. Manhwa once turned the martial world into a sea of blood. However, after a climactic battle with the 5 masters of the world, he was sealed away. Millennia passed, and now he awakens, not on Earth, but on an alien planet. Here, in the GSP, a universal combat tournament is held every 100 years, and he prepares to face the strongest warriors once again. The chapter begins by telling us that, according to a legend passed down in the martial kingdom since ancient times, it is said that the soul of a master who discovered the truth of all creation and came one step away from reaching the pinnacle of the world will seek someone to inherit the grand, unfulfilled ambition and guide that person to the zenith. We then see a mountainous landscape, and someone says they thought that was just a ridiculous tale, but now they believe. We also see some people face to face with an old man. This man is the next Grandmaster of the Fire Dragon Clan, John Beck. In the next panel, a battle is taking place, and someone takes a direct hit. Another person, in contrast, wonders, why? The body of the guy who took the hit is lying on the ground, 2 men with swords surrounding him. We're then shown one of the 12 masters, wielder of the spiritual sword. Dan! He announces to someone that, for murdering countless warriors and spreading chaos through those lands, and just as he's about to declare the execution sentence, a man with white hair and red eyes simply slashes Dan's neck and executes him in cold blood. We see that this man with white hair and red eyes is our protagonist. He tells us that he is the soul from that legend about the zenith that chose him. An attack from several swordsmen comes toward our protagonist. He then activates an ability in his sword. He doesn't seem nervous. In fact, he's smiling and confident. In the next panel, we see that he simply wiped out everyone coming his way. He walks away saying, "We are the zenith of this world." Sometime later, we see someone on a throne, apparently our white-haired guy. His hands are old. He says he believes everything he said before was how it was meant to be, but he wonders why he is no longer guided by the zenith. We then see him older, sitting on a throne. Someone calls him, referring to him as Lord. It's revealed that our white-haired guy is now old. John Beck, once the leader of the Fire Dragon Clan, is now the current leader of the Blood Demon sect. One of his subordinates enters the hall where he is, and says he has obtained something. He asks John to please take a look at the test subject he brought, a person kneeling and tied up. He tells John that this subject is the first to survive the experiment of soul and flesh immortality. The subject then speaks in a strange voice, his teeth exposed. He looks like a monster. He says he will never forgive them for destroying him and his family. The subordinate then pulls the rope tied to the man's neck, who writhes in pain. We see that his mouth is already disfigured. It even seems like he has 3 mouths, including one on his eye. The subordinate looks at the subject and curses him as miserable trash, asking who gave him permission to open his filthy mouth. The subordinate then turns back to his lord, John. He says that, unlike the other test subjects, this one can even speak. We see the subject totally disfigured and lifeless, a monster born from experiments. The subordinate says that, in addition to what he just said, the subject managed to survive for weeks without a single drop of water or a grain of food. However, his lord cuts him off, saying that's enough. John then says he waited for decades, and all he managed to create was a disgusting creature. John then tells him that he supposes these experiments are beyond his subordinate's capabilities. The subordinate becomes frightened and scared. He says no, that if given a little more time, he and the others will certainly complete the immortality of flesh and soul. Then, John walks past him, coughing and clearly unwell. Suddenly, the subordinate's hand starts moving on its own. He opens the container with the liquid used on the test subject. He begins struggling, as his arm is moving by itself. Then, he drinks the liquid he himself created. Instantly, his face begins to disfigure, with several eyes appearing and a hand coming out of his face. He begs his lord, John, to spare his life. He agonizes, calling out to his lord, while the test subject on the floor simply stares at the remaining liquid spilled on the ground. In the next scene, We see John coughing blood and struggling to leave the place, as his body seems to be at its limit. John asks something or someone why they no longer respond to him, probably referring to the zenith. Then he looks at the moon outside, and says he knows that soul still exists inside him. He then tells it to teach him the martial arts. His face is covered in blood, his hands stained. He is probably dying from some illness. Then, John begs for that soul, that zenith, to give him the immortality of flesh and soul. And then, a mysterious voice emerges, as if it were a being. We see its silhouette behind John, its red eyes glowing, resembling a mysterious entity. This being then tells John Beck that he is still as foolish as ever. He says that the art of immortality of flesh and soul is already complete. Then, we see that the test subject is approaching behind John and leaps toward him. The Lord notices and, using his magic, manages to stop the subject just in time. John then says that this can't be real. He asks the being if it chose that test subject as a vessel to replace him. The test subject boy says he will curse everyone, even from the grave and even from the depths of hell. John then asks the being. John says he fulfilled the being's great ambition and asks if, even so, it still dares to betray him. The being then says it's a shame that John is still blind to the truth, and that, in that case, it will show him the truth he refuses to see. John's eyes then reveal a transformed being, a sort of celestial entity. Apparently, the test subject boy had turned into that. The being gave all of its power to the boy. John then falls to the ground, shocked. He asks if that is the truth. He also asks if such a tiny vessel could really contain it. And then the test subject, no longer transformed in John's perception, kills him with a direct strike. The being asks the boy if he despises that world for having taken his family away. The boy, now completely different, his face disfigured and a red mist flowing from his mouth and eyes. The being then says that if that's the case, it will offer a solution to the boy. The guards arrive and see what's happening. They ask themselves what that thing is. John's body is on the ground, and the boy stands beside it, with red smoke rising from his head, as if he were transforming into something. The guards then order his immediate removal. As they move toward the boy, the being tells him that in exchange for the power, he must defeat the countless powerful warriors of that world. The boy then stands. His head is surrounded by a red flame. He looks possessed. The being continues, saying that he must claim the other warriors' strength as his own. Meanwhile, the boy only smiles. The guards charge at him, and the being says he must not let anyone stand above him. Bodies on the ground, a sword soaked in blood, the being saying that when that day comes, the boy's face is now normal, the red mist fading from his head, his eyes completely red, a smile across his face. And the being concludes that when the day comes, both of them shall aim for the zenith, once again. Then we see the boy descending stairs, his gaze terrifying, a beast, a demon, his body covered in a red, demonic aura, sword in hand, while other swords pierce his body. Yet they seem to have no effect. And then, this boy became something far beyond what John ever was. We begin with 4 people in front of a house, apparently the children of a man who is about to leave to do something. One of the kids tells him to be careful. The man then heads off through the forest. The moon is full, the forest blanketed in night. This man then arrives at a place, climbs the stairs, opens the entrance doors, and steps inside. He finds 4 people in a place that seems to have been searched or where a battle may have taken place. The 4 people turn to face the lone man. They say it's been a while. One of them is revealed to be King of Fists by Yuck. He tells the old man to say something again. Another is revealed as the Empress of the North, Selwie Jean. She wonders if the old man was also summoned. We also see another elder revealed to be the head monk of the Shaolin Temple, Monk Hien. Then, another man introduces himself. He says that he, Muryong Beck, leader of the Fire Dragon clan, pays his respects to the esteemed Sword Emperor, looks at the old man in front of him and asks how he's been. The old man then says that's enough of the pointless chatter. He asks Muryong if he really thought he wouldn't find out about the spies planted around him the moment he left the martial realm. He tells him to hurry up and explain why he dragged an old gambling man into his affairs. Muryong then says, "Very well." He admits that he knows how shameless this might seem, but he'll get straight to the point. Muryong explains that prestigious clans like Madang Janam and Wasen were all ruined by a single entity. In the image, we can see who it was, The former test subject boy, now older, and standing atop a pile of bodies he left on his own. Murion says they know nothing about this entity's purpose or identity, but witnesses claimed his fighting style resembles that of a berserk demon, which earned him the nickname, Mad Demon. Murion says that today they will put an end to this madness. Meanwhile, someone approaches the place where they are. A massive explosion rocks the entrance. Everyone looks in that direction. The newcomer arrives, saying he followed the trail of a powerful energy, one that brought him to a place he's always missed. It's revealed who just showed up, the Mad Demon. He says that all 5 supreme masters of that era have gathered in one place. He then assumes that means they were all waiting for him. The old man wonders if it's really him, the Mad Demon. He says it seems the nickname isn't an exaggeration. It feels like he's facing the god of death himself. We see the former boy, now a grown man. In the old man's vision, it seems as if a demon with a scythe is walking behind him. The old man tells the Mad Demon that he's given an old man a reason to draw his sword once again. The boy just looks confused. Then the old man charges at him and attacks with a technique called Celestial Blade Dance. He moves at an absurd speed. The blade is about to strike the Mad Demon, who's laughing. The old man unleashes another attack. Heaven's Soul Strike. It looks like only the demon's hand remains on the ground, buried under rubble, after a direct hit from the old man. One of the Supreme Masters tells the elder that he should have gone easier on the kid, saying that was boring. He then asks if they saw what he meant, that all that talk about a Mad Demon was nothing more than an exaggerated rumor. But everyone else is silent and staring at where the demon had stood. The master asks what those expressions are about, and then we see a disfigured smile, saying it was better than he expected. The demon then stands back up. The master is confused, unsure of what the hell is happening. The Mad Demon's body begins to reconstruct. The master is stunned and says it must be a nightmare. The old man then wonders if this is the legendary martial art that makes someone immortal, the art of the immortality of flesh and soul. Meanwhile, we see the Mad Demon regenerating and staring at them with bloodthirsty eyes. The old man wonders if that art really exists, as he watches the one he had just dismembered with a fatal blow fully rebuild his body like it was nothing. The Mad Demon says that was impressive, and adds that he thinks it's his turn now. One of the masters shouts at the elder, asking what he's doing. The elder charges once more straight at the demon. The master screams for him to get away from that monster. The demon then smiles, looks at the master behind him, and says not to worry about the old man, he's already had enough fun with him. Then, in the next panel, we see the old man covered in blood. He took a direct hit that no one saw. He falls to the ground, already eliminated. The demon then steps forward with a smile and asks who's next. The female master present tells Murion to stay focused. He's consumed by rage. She says that, as the leader of the Fire Dragon clan, he must know something about what they just witnessed. Murion says he's not sure, but he remembers reading about something similar in ancient books. One of the masters is still staring at the old man, who was just executed on the ground. He's furious as well. Murion then wonders about the explosive power he felt, and when he looks, Master Bai is charging forward, enraged, trying to take down the Mad Demon alone. Murion yells for him not to go. Master Bai shouts at the demon, calling him a bastard and asking how he dares. Master Bai charges with all his fury and hatred toward the demon. He's out of control. The demon simply says he must be the King of Fists. Master Bai then attacks the demon directly with his fists, using the Explosive Fist Gale. The demon clashes head-on with the strike, and yells for Bai to give it his all. A massive explosion occurs at the site. The Mad Demon seemingly gets blasted out of the area. Murion, watching everything, wonders if that was truly the power of the King of Fists. He says it's incredible. However, with attacks like that, they'll never be able to defeat him. When the dust clears, we see the demon took the blow directly to the stomach. A massive hole was torn into him, his belly blown open, yet he's still standing, facing Master Bai. The master tells himself it's impossible the demon endured his explosive fist gale without even moving, and he realizes the demon's energy is growing even stronger. In the panel, we see the demon has grabbed one of the master's hands. The demon speaks. He says he must admit the master's martial arts are truly incredible, and for that reason, he will take them for himself. The master thinks to himself that this can't be happening. Energy starts to rise around them, and then the demon uses the same move, Explosive Fist Gale, that Master Bai had used, but now against him. The attack is so powerful it looks like the master had been incinerated by its force. However, one of the other masters, Hyan, absorbed the attack and pulled Master Bai out just in time. The demon then tells the monk it wasn't his turn yet. Master Bai is lying on the ground, completely terrified, while Master Monk Hyan absorbed the blow, and his left hand was completely destroyed. Hyan tells the demon to know his place and calls him a brat. The brat lets out a chuckle and says, acting tough in that condition. He adds that the monk can barely stand. Master Bai keeps blaming himself. The monk's hands have both been torn from his arms. Master Bai keeps saying he's sorry, that if he hadn't done that. Monk Hyan tells him to stop saying that because, if he hadn't acted, he would've. He says they can sort out the little things after they deal with that monster, referring to the demon. The demon looks at the monk with curiosity, then laughs and says to himself, a body that can endure the martial art of the King of Fists. The demon then charges forward and says the monk's body must be using the indestructible body technique. The female master then steps in. She says, no way, and immediately uses the frozen sea sword, freezing the demon just as he was charging wildly toward the monk. Frozen by the woman, he looks back and asks if that is the legendary martial art of the ice palace of the northern sea. The master just tells him to shut up. The demon says it's an intense cold, freezing him to the bone. He says it's no surprise they're called the 5 Supreme Masters, that they all possess martial arts that have reached enlightenment. He says he truly admires that. Muryong, from behind them all, finally speaks. He says he's glad to hear the demon is impressed, and in that case, he, Muryong Baek, leader of the Fire Dragon clan, asks permission to show his martial art as well. Muryong then charges forward and slices the frozen body of the mad demon in half. The demon simply looks down, confused, and asks if that was it. Muryong calmly says for him to remain in darkness for all eternity. The demon starts to ask what he's talking about when suddenly a bunch of ribbons burst out from inside his body, wrapping around him. He screams, asking what that is. His body continues to be bound more and more. He yells, asking what Muryong did to him, and then his body is completely consumed by the ribbons. The demon says to himself that his entire body is starting to lose strength. He screams, and in the end, his body seems to have turned into a statue made of ribbons. Muryong's technique seems to have succeeded in defeating him. Monk Hyan then says to Muryong that he has never seen a martial art like that in his life, not even in old age, and asks what it was that he just witnessed. Muryong says it's a secret artifact passed down for generations among the leaders of the Fire Dragon clan, known as the Demon Sealing Sword. Muryong explains that it is said anyone cut by its blade will spend all eternity in darkness. However, there are no actual records of it ever being used. Muryong says that, therefore, he's not sure how long the effect will last, so they should be prepared. 3,000 years later, we're shown a technological base. Then the location is revealed. Earth year 2600, planet GSP, Sector 3. Someone introduces himself as Mark. He's from Earth's public relations team. He says that some of the specimens are fragile, so they need to be careful at all times. A fully suited up man asks Mark if he's the only representative from the advanced team. Mark smiles and says no, there's one more, so there are 2 of them. He then tells the suited figure that the second member is the woman standing right over there in front of him. Mark then wonders to himself, as he looks at the woman, why she's just wandering around without saying anything. We see that Mark is indeed a member of Earth's public relations team. The woman then continues observing the entire area. She says something and comments that she's finally arrived on this shitty planet. She is the leader of Earth's public relations team, Rena. Mark then calls out to her. Rena asks Mark what he's so excited about since it's not like they're on vacation right now. Mark says there's not much they can do until the main group arrives, so technically, they are on vacation. Rena just calls him a weirdo. Mark then says he didn't expect Rena to volunteer to join GSP, which, in his opinion, was a huge surprise. Rena asks why. Mark says it's fascinating that someone who can't stand aliens would willingly come to the place with the highest concentration of aliens in the entire galaxy. And then, out of nowhere, we're shown a city full of non-human beings, all living together in harmony. Mark and Rena walk through the city on the planet. Various different beings are shown. Meanwhile, Mark says that the place is overflowing with species she wouldn't even dare to look in the eyes back on Earth. Rena tells him to stop admiring the scenery like that. Being there doesn't make it any less dangerous. And Mark asks what's different now, since in the tournament, All species are equals. Rina then asks if Mark really believes that a naive mind like his, but Mark isn't paying attention. He's trying on random headbands at a local stall. Rina doesn't finish what she was going to say, tells him to forget it, and orders him to return to the exhibition hall. Mark becomes curious about what she was going to say. Rina says Mark must have a strong stomach and asks if he really wants to just accept things from these disgusting freaks, referring to the beings working there. Mark then tells Rina that saying stuff like that is dangerous, even if they're supposed to be equals. Rina replies no, that it's because they're not equals. She sighs and wonders if someone as spoiled as him would ever understand. In her thoughts, Rina says that no, it has nothing to do with them being aliens. When she's about to say that calling anyone disgusting, she cuts herself off and says that must be the place they were heading to. Mark asks, "What?" And Rina says it's there, that they'll stand on equal footing with them. Mark asks if that place isn't the stadium for the GSP tournament. We're then shown Sector 3, Stadium. An alien welcomes people from across the universe. Inside the packed stadium, the alien announcer says they're about to witness the universe's greatest festival, held only once every 100 years. He says it's a stage that gives civilizations the chance to climb the rankings in one single leap, the GSP Battle Tournament. Mark and Rina are inside the stadium watching. Mark says she's there to watch the tournament, so why did she give him so much grief when he said he came to have fun? Rina replies that she's there to analyze their weaknesses. Mark wonders what the hell she's talking about. The stadium announcer introduces one of the competitors. He says, representing the rank 972 civilization from planet Ifrit, Agni. We see a being completely engulfed in flames. It looks like a fire monster. The announcer then introduces Agni's opponent, representing the rank 9630 civilization from planet Piccolo, Panin. He seems humanoid, but has horns and jaws with claws. The announcer shouts to the packed arena. He asks who will come out victorious in this duel. The crowd roars, and the duel is set in the center. We see both competitors already inside the arena, facing each other. The announcer then says they'll now begin the Group 6 preliminaries. In the exhibition hall on Z Street, Sector 3 of GSP, two guys are working. One of them calls the other's attention, saying they should clock out for the day, and the other responds, "All right." The scene then reveals that, right next to them, is the statue that sealed the mad demon who apparently remained trapped for these 3,000 years. Basically, he was sealed away. For a second, the guy nearby seems confused. Another guy asks why he's standing still and tells him to move. He asks if the other guy heard a sound. The guy replies it must have just been him talking nonsense. Meanwhile, we notice the statue that held the mad demon beginning to crack and crumble. The worker then says he must be hearing things, and suddenly, the mad demon's eyes open. His statue is cracked and breaking. He is awake, and the chapter ends with him awakened, watching what's happening around him. The chapter opens with a television announcement, stating that on planet GSP, 500,000 light-years from Earth, a combat tournament is held every 100 years, with participants from civilizations across the universe. In this tournament, it's said the winning civilization will discover the truth of all things and be free from any negative effects, such as disease, hunger, and war. And for the first time, the United Earth Government, GTU, is finally qualified to participate. The GTU's representative is known as the strongest person on Earth. The TV anchor says many believe reaching the finals will be easy, and that winning the tournament is no longer a far-off dream. Back at the tournament, the announcer shouts that, indeed, he lives up to the nickname, Walking Wildfire, that his species has earned. The announcer says that, once his restrictions were lifted, the entire arena was swallowed by intense flames, referring, most likely, to the fire monster-like competitor mentioned earlier. Mark and Rina are watching the fight. Inside the arena, the other competitor is shown with blood on his face, panting. He comments on the walking wildfire, and calls his opponent a bastard. On the other side, we see the fire being laughing, charging toward him at full speed, flames everywhere. He says he's going to turn the guy into barbecue. The crowd is cheering. In the stands, someone says they bet everything on the walking wildfire, and tells him to go all out. The announcer says the crowd's excitement is as intense as Agni's flames. He remarks that this participant's popularity is absolutely overwhelming. While the crowd chants Agni's name, Panin, the opponent, just watches. Agni then approaches him, his body completely engulfed in flames. He asks how Panin dares to get distracted while fighting him. Panin then takes an insanely intense fire blast. The announcer goes wild, shocked by Agni's fire breath. He says that the breath is known to melt even the most resilient spaceships, and that it's surging directly toward Panin. While Rina and Mark watch the battle closely, the announcer continues saying that Agni truly seems like a tough opponent for a Tier 1 civilization. In the arena, Agni then shouts to the crowd. He asks if they were able to witness the power of Lord Agni, and calls them all fools. Mark, in the stands, asks Rina how they're supposed to fight a monster like that. Rina remains deep in thought. Mark asks if they're really going to keep looking for weaknesses, saying he doesn't think it will help at all. Rina then says that it really does seem pointless now. And Mark says, "That's what I've been saying, so we're just wasting time." But Rina replies no, that it's not just that. Rina says she also feels terrible, but that she received something important. She says that absolutely none of the Tier 3 or higher aliens are paying attention to this match, as we see a few beings who are likely higher watching indifferently. She says that since this tournament can completely change the fate of an entire civilization, she expected their reactions to be different. So it seems that a Tier 1 civilization is meaningless in their eyes. Therefore, she says, they'll use that arrogance in Earth's favor. Rina then tells Mark that if he understood, he should stay quiet and keep searching for weaknesses like they planned. Mark says no, what he means is, why they, from the public relations team, have to do this. Out of nowhere, right beside Mark and Rina, a little girl appears, apparently from Panin's race, desperately shouting for him not to lose. Mark then asks himself if she's a Piglo child and says, "Poor thing for her." He comments that unfortunately, her civilization just got unlucky with the brackets. He thinks to himself that her first opponent is already one of the most powerful Tier 3 civilizations. The announcer continues excitedly narrating the battle. He says the heat of the flames has finally lessened, but he still can't see Panin anywhere. Another small being in the crowd, standing beside Rina, Mark, and the Piglo child, shouts for them to just announce the winner already. He calls Panin trash, and says he probably already turned to ashes, and was carried away by the wind. Mark thinks to himself that there's someone dangerous nearby, and that he needs to warn the team leader so they can leave. Meanwhile, the Piglo girl turns to the other guy and yells at him not to speak that way about Panin when he knows nothing about him. The guy then says the shorty has no manners and adds that it's to be expected from an inferior species. The girl responds that he's short too and calls him a brat. Mark tells Rina they should leave quickly, that if they stay there, they might get caught up in the two's argument. At the same time, we see that the other little guy is pissed about the shorty comment. He throws away the mug he was holding and suddenly seems to grow stronger. He calls her a little Piglo bitch and asks if she wants to hear something interesting. The little girl looks scared by the sudden change in mood and the guy's physical appearance. He then says that, actually, he's pretty normal back on his planet. Mark yells out, shocked, telling Rina to look, what's happening is actually dangerous. When we go back to the two fighting, we see the little guy is not short anymore. He's giant and muscular. His body is emitting yellow lightning, as if he activated something inside himself. The little guy then tells the girl it would take less than 10 seconds to turn her planet's representative into a puddle of blood. He's fuming with rage. His information is then shown. He's the representative of the Pixie civilization, rank 1300, engineer, Mr. Pixie. Rina then casually says to Pixie, is it really that impressive for him to show off his strength in front of a kid? Pixie gets even more furious and asks what Rina just said. She turns to him and asks if he wasn't the one who said he's considered completely normal on his planet. Rina adds that he should stop pretending to be hot stuff, that the way he talks makes it obvious he's a total loser. Pixie then says he's amazed that inferior civilizations all decided to take the same damn drug today. He asks why they're ganging up on him to piss him off. Mark then asks if he's being included in all this mess too. Rina, standing behind Mark, keeps throwing shade at Pixie. She asks if, even if he's mad, what could he even do anyway, and calls him a loser again. Pixie gets even angrier. Meanwhile, Mark argues with Rina. He tells her to get away from him, because he's going to get hit too just for being with her. Rina says, what? And then asks if he's trying to abandon his team leader. In the middle of all that, Pixie speaks. The two look at him. He says he's going to show Rina what he's capable of and charges forward to land a punch on her and Mark, who didn't even want to be involved in the first place. But just as he's about to land the blow, someone tells him to stop. It looks like a robot. Pixie is startled and asks himself, "Right now of all times?" Mark then asks if that's what he thinks it is. Rena says it's a security drone that patrols the entire arena. She then says that, with so many of those drones flying around, she wonders how the guy, referring to Pixie, ever thought he could get away with doing anything in the stadium. The drone asks if the Pixie, referring to Pixie's species, hurt them in any way. Rena says no, not directly, but that he suddenly started showing off his muscles and wonders if maybe he's drunk. Rena says that because of that, she felt so disgusted she'd lost her appetite, but that it's fine now. The drone asks about him showing off his muscles, and if it's true. Rena then tells the Pixie, to confirm it, that he was bragging about his physique right in front of them. She asks him to confirm that, and tells Pixie, why doesn't he try doing the same thing in front of the patrol officer? Pixie grits his teeth in rage. He calls Rena a bitch, and asks how she dares. Mark then asks Rena what the hell she's doing, saying that Pixie is so angry his eyes are about to pop out. Rena says she's preventing Pixie from hurting someone, and that telling the truth would just get him off without any consequences. What she means is, this is her way of punishing him. Pixie notices something while Mark pleads with Rena to just let him go, to stop provoking him. The patrol drone asks Pixie if he really wanted to show off his muscles that badly. Pixie then agrees and says yes, smiling strangely, but admits he just wanted to show off a little. He returns to his original state and asks if that means he didn't do anything wrong. He simply runs off, saying he'll see Mark and Rena later and calls them pests. Mark says he doesn't even want to see him in his dreams and asks Rena if she expected that outcome. She says it was obvious. Rena asks Mark if he really thinks she's crazy enough to provoke a monster like that without thinking things through first. Mark says he thought he was about to develop alien phobia again. Then, the little girl from the beginning of the fight politely thanks Rena for helping her. Rena gives her a look of disdain and says, "Helping? Who helped who?" She tells the girl to scram because she's distracting her from paying attention to the match. Mark makes a sulky face and thinks to himself that it was just as he imagined. Rena probably just got angry without any actual plan. He then pats the little girl on the head. He asks if she heard the scary lady, and tells her to go find her family. The girl looks up at Mark and tells him to get his hand off her, calling him a coward. She walks off, and Mark wonders if she was scared too, asking himself why she treated him that way. Rena then tells him to shut up and calls him a coward too. Meanwhile, the crowd keeps shouting for Panon to stop hiding and show himself. Some yell, asking if he still dares to call himself the representative of his civilization. The arena is still literally on fire. The announcer says harsh criticism is raining down from the audience. Rena keeps watching. She also thinks to herself that she already expected this, but the gap between a Tier 1 and a Tier 3 civilization is truly despairing. Agni, still in the arena, laughs and says it's been a long time since he last played hide and seek. Rena, from the stands, continues wondering if it's really impossible for humans to defeat a monster like that. A flashback from Rena's past shows people on the ground, apparently dead or suffering from diseases, with boils on their faces and some still groaning in pain. She briefly remembers those scenes and tells herself she can't have such weak thoughts anymore. Mark notices her and asks why she's acting like that again. He asks if she's okay because she's trembling. Rena tells him not to worry, that it's nothing. Then, the announcer yells to the crowd, "Wait, that's participant Panon." Rena is extremely shocked. The announcer keeps shouting. He says Panon has attacked Agni's blind spot through the flames, and now Agni is being defeated by Panon. The narrator keeps shouting, saying Panon landed a desperate strike with his life on the line, and hit it perfectly. Rena watches everything closely. The announcer says it's going to deal considerable damage to Agni, who is unable to get back up. Meanwhile, Mark is answering a call, and seems disturbed by something. He calls Rena's attention. She asks why he keeps bothering her, and reminds him she said she's fine. Mark says it's not that. He explains they were told something's wrong with the exhibition, and they've been asked to check it out immediately. Rena and Mark then head out. Rena asks if she didn't tell Mark to double-check everything. He says it's strange. He's sure he did double-check. Rena says she knew something would go wrong the moment he started talking about vacations and getting excited. As they walk toward the location, we see that Pixie is hiding behind a pillar, just watching them. Mark and Rena continue walking. Mark says again how strange it is, that nothing should have gone wrong. Rena replies that it doesn't matter. She already saw what she wanted to see. She asks Mark if he saw it too, that she could barely believe it. She never imagined Panin would beat Agni. We see Panin landing a clean strike on Agni's blind spot, causing a major turnaround in the battle and Panin winning. Rena is speaking to Mark. She says that, as expected, they're not unbeatable opponents. But then, Mark is suddenly punched directly, and is thrown back fast. Rena looks up, wondering what kind of wind just hit them, but a giant hand is reaching toward her head. The next panel shows Zone 3, Z Street, Planet GSP, Planet Promotion Center. We see Rena's eyes. She's waking up, and then we see Mark being carried away by a giant creature, and Rena being grabbed by the hair by another one of the same species. Rena fully regains consciousness and asks herself where Mark is, while being held by her hair. She screams for Mark to wake up, and we see that with them are Pixie and an accomplice. Pixie asks if she's finally awake. The other one asks if, when she says, "Mark," she means the guy he's holding. Pixie, still holding Rena by the hair, tells her not to worry if that's the case, they haven't executed him yet. Rena calls him a bastard. Rena calls Pixie a bastard and asks if he's doing all this just because she teased him a little. She asks if he has no ability to learn, reminding him that the planet they're on is GSP, and that the security team will be sent shortly. Pixie's accomplice says he doubts that. He explains that most of the planet's security devices rely on their civilization's tech, and he already dealt with most of them in the building. Pixie asks if Rena understands and calls her a brat. He says the Galactic Federation isn't what it used to be, now accepting incompetent people like them. Rena repeats, "Accepting?" Then she screams at him to shut up. Rena says that we, referring to the humans, didn't even want to join the useless Federation, but they suddenly showed up and forced them to join. We then see how it happened. A race of angel-like aliens arrives on Earth and makes this alliance with Earth's leaders. Rena says that because of the contagious disease they brought, even now billions of Earthlings are dying in pain. She curses the Federation, calling it damned. She says they claim that interference between civilizations is not allowed, yet they never offered any support. Meanwhile, we see her saying this as images of people writhing in pain on Earth are shown. Pixie and his partner remain silent, and then suddenly start laughing at Rena. Pixie calls her a bitch, and asks if she's saying her whole civilization is screwed. His partner laughs and says, "No support," then asks her if she thinks the Federation is some kind of charity. He even questions this so-called contagious disease, asking if there really exists a civilization so primitive that it still suffers from such things. Rena just glares angrily. Pixie says he thought primitive beings only existed in museums. They continue dragging Mark and Rena somewhere. Pixie's partner then notices something and asks who's there in the area. Someone in the place they were heading starts talking. This person says he was wondering what kind of sect brought him here and asks if it was them. He then says that he assumes the Shaolin Temple still has a solid reputation in the martial world. We now know the guy is free and wide awake, ready to wreck someone. The mad demon appears. He is awake and unsealed. He asks if they don't think the interior decoration has changed drastically. He probably thinks he's still in the temple, since it's been 3,000 years since he was mummified. The mad demon says it's so extravagant it could be a private suite in a luxury inn. Rena starts wondering, hearing the language, if he might be from Earth. Pixie's partner asks what the guy is even talking about. He tells him to speak in the universal language and calls him trash. Rena remembers that the two of them can't understand Earth languages. The mad demon asks what they're saying, and also, if it's not just the decor that's changed. Rena then tells herself that this person, referring to the mad demon, doesn't understand the universal language, and that maybe that's for the best. Rena then yells in Earth language for the demon to get out of there and calls security immediately, because those two, Pixie and his partner, are trying to break Federation rules. The mad demon just stares, not understanding much. Pixie slams Rena's face to the ground and asks what they think they're trying to do, if they want to die that badly. The mad demon then laughs and says he understands now. He raises his hands. He says not everything has changed. Pixie's partner tries to attack the demon, but the mad demon's hand starts glowing near the guy's chest, and then, explosive storm of fists. The mad demon unleashes his strike. A massive burst of power comes from him. Pixie and his partner are sliced in half by the impact. Rina is left completely stunned, horrified by what just happened. The mad demon smiles and tells her there's no need to be so surprised. He then asks if she understands what he's saying. Rina stares at him in complete shock. He says he has a lot of questions, so if she tries to run without a good reason, he'll kill her on the spot. And with that, the chapter ends, with a powerful being from an ancient era now awakened and ready to crush anyone who opposes him. Rina asks the mad demon about those questions he said he had, then asks how he did that. He then points his hands toward her and says that as she values her life, she should speak properly. Rina immediately remembers he doesn't speak the universal language. The mad demon asks her to first explain where they are. She tells him it's the promotional building on Z Street. He's surprised and asks if it's not the Shaolin Temple, adding that the energy of the place feels definitely different. Rina is still completely terrified by what she just saw. Meanwhile, the demon continues. He says the atmosphere inside is way too noisy to be that of a bald monk temple. Rina asks what he is. She starts touching him, saying the language, the appearance. She says it's clear that he's a human from Earth. She says he doesn't seem to have any kind of special device, and begins to ask what that explosion was that she just witnessed. The demon gets angry and asks if she's crazy, and what she keeps murmuring about. Rina takes his hands off her head, and says she's asking who he is, what his affiliation is. The mad demon asks what she means by affiliation. He says, no way, she doesn't know who he is. Rina says obviously not and asks how she would know. She then changes her tone and asks if he's some kind of celebrity. Then suddenly she yells, behind you! One of the pixies is still alive and charges at them full force to execute them both. The pixie is filled with rage. He asks how they dare and calls the demon a lesser creature. The demon just glances to the side with a bored expression and says, ah, so persistent. The pixie is about to land a full power blow on the demon's face. But the demon simply slaps the pixie's hand away, and it's knocked back effortlessly. Then the demon says they're just useless brutes and delivers a punch straight to the pixie's gut. While his hand is practically buried inside the pixie, he asks if they've even trained there. Inner energy. The blow sends the pixie flying. Rina watches in disbelief, wondering if he really blocked the giant pixie with a single hand. The demon turns to her and asks if she still doesn't know who he really is. Rina wonders who the hell this guy is. If he's that strong, and from Earth, it'd be strange if people didn't know him. Rina then says she's sorry, but she doesn't know much about Earth since she spends most of her time on other planets. The demon then says, other planets? Earth? He asks what she's talking about. She replies that it's exactly what she said. She can't spend much time on Earth because of work. Then Mark wakes up and calls out to her. He shows up beside them and asks what's going on. Rina says he woke up. The mad demon asks where these weaklings, referring to Mark, keep coming from. Mark just looks at the demon and asks who he is. Rina then asks if he doesn't know either and begins to explain. Mark asks if he's some fake celebrity. Rina says it seems like he is, or maybe not. Mark asks what the point of all this is. Then Mark says to the demon that he's grateful for being saved, but it'll be hard to cooperate if the demon won't reveal his identity. The demon lets out a laugh, puts a hand on his face, and asks if Mark dared to threaten him. He then flips his hair back, laughs again, and says fine, he'll tell them. He declares that he is the great demon, Ma Jinwoo. Thank you for finally saying your name. The writer appreciates it. He says he's the demon who destroyed the 4 great sects. Rina and Mark just look blankly at him. Neither of them has any clue what the hell that even means. Mark wonders to himself what kind of childish context and weird name this is. He then whispers to Rina that he doesn't think Jinwoo is mentally stable. Rina says, great demon Ma Jinwoo. She doesn't know what it means, but the name sounds extraordinary. She tells Mark the demon might be, but doesn't finish the sentence because one of the pixies starts moving again. He punches the ground and then gets up, questioning if he really lost to some trash. Mark asks why there are still pixies here, and then asks if it's because of what happened earlier. The pixie rises again, furious. He starts getting pissed, mumbling that if it weren't for that damn suppressor. Mark asks Rina if she thinks the pix is about to explode. Jinwoo, that's the mad demon, if you haven't memorized it yet, just watches as the pixie rise in rage, trying to break the limiter. Rina then calls out to Jinwoo. She asks if he can defeat that pixie in his current state. Mark keeps asking what the hell she's doing, and says they should just run away. Jinwoo comments, "In his current state?" and asks if the pixie wasn't using his full power until now. Rina says that's right, he wasn't even using half of his strength. Jinwoo asks if she's saying the pixie went easy on him, and then he charges toward the pixie. Rina tells Mark to wait, that they should try to gather information from Jinwoo. Mark screams, "No!" and asks what she's even talking about. He says she knows better than anyone what happens when you let your guard down. Rina says she knows, but she has a feeling this might be an opportunity. Mark tells her to forget it, and just run. Rina says no, she'll stay and watch the fight. Mark then runs off on his own, shouting that everyone's gone crazy, and he doesn't understand anything anymore. Rina tells herself that maybe this is madness, like Mark said, but Jinwoo clearly showed, in front of such an overpowered monster, the true potential of Tier 1 civilization. Earthlings, meanwhile, Jinwoo is walking toward the pixie, who is completely consumed by rage. They now stand face to face. Jinwoo wants to see the pixie's full power, as he refuses to believe he fought him at anything less than that. Rina tells herself that, although it was thanks to the suppressor, with that level of strength, she truly believes Jinwoo has a real chance to defeat the pixie. The pixie then snaps and shouts, "To hell with the regulations!" He says he'll eliminate Jinwoo with his own hands. Rina looks on, shocked. This is her first time seeing a pixie without its suppressor. They're a cosmic species capable of freely manipulating any metal. Pixie has entered his final form. He's enormous and enraged, controlling all the metals around him to attack Jinwoo with full force. Jinwoo is impressed. Pixie hurls 2 massive chunks of metal at the mad demon. Pixie tells him to witness the difference between their civilizations, tells Jinwoo to go die, and calls him trash. The metal traps Jinwoo inside, and then he causes the metal to shrink. Jinwoo is locked inside the twisted metal bubble, but he's laughing, saying it's all very tempting. Jinwoo then breaks free from the metal bubble like it was nothing. The pixie is stunned. Jinwoo simply steps out of the metallic prison. He then mocks the pixie by calling him Baldy, and says he wants the pixie's power for himself. The pixie can't believe it. He wonders how Jinwoo escaped his power. He says there's no way. He wonders if Jinwoo is stronger than him even without a suppressor, but then regains his sanity and counterattacks, shouting that it can't be true, that he's the one who's stronger than Jinwoo. Pixie strikes directly. He laughs and says that blow should have done the job. Jinwoo then suddenly appears above the pixie's neck. The pixie asks how Jinwoo dares to be above him. Jinwoo asks what the hell he's been ranting about this whole time. The pixie tries to grab him, but Jinwoo dodges. The pixie gets even angrier. He charges forward and asks what kind of trick Jinwoo is using. Jinwoo then starts manipulating metal just like the pixie did. He gives a little smirk and asks, "So this is how it works?" Jinwoo's hands are now glowing with the same yellow energy as the pixie's. The pixie is in disbelief. He immediately wonders if this is for real, and then gets hit by a brutal energy blast from Jinwoo. Rina just watches, stunned and speechless at everything that's happening. The pixie is still alive, cursing Jinwoo and calling him trash. He asks how Jinwoo is using the cosmic power of their civilization. We see Jinwoo fully mastering the abilities he absorbed from the pixie. Jinwoo then asks, "So this is called cosmic power?" and says he likes it. He gets into position to attack again. As a form of thanks, he says he'll show the pixie his own technique. The pixie is enraged, charging up for another strike. He screams at the mad demon, asking how he dares to imitate the pixie race. Jinwoo then concentrates an absurd amount of energy and responds by saying he didn't imitate him. Out of nowhere, Jinwoo suddenly leaps toward the pixie with such speed that the pixie can't even finish his sentence. Jinwoo's strike lands squarely in the pixie's stomach at an incredible speed. Jinwoo calls this move the Fierce Tiger Palm, and, with a smile, says he didn't imitate the pixie, he stole his ability. Jinwoo adapted the pixie's abilities, and delivered a fatal blow that secured his victory. Rina watches everything. She's in shock. She tells herself that Jinwoo really won. She continues, saying that a representative of a Tier 3 civilization used cosmic power, and concludes by saying that it's madness. Jinwoo walks away and says that this martial art is quite interesting. To him, it's actually kind of fun. Jinwoo then calls out to Rina. He tells her to take him to wherever they keep all those bald guys, like the one he just defeated. Rina grabs his hand and says that, just as expected, that's why he came there, the reason he infiltrated the planet. She then asks if he wanted to prove his strength, while Jinwoo doesn't understand what she's talking about. He even asks himself, "Infiltrate?" Rina says she understands now, and that she'll take him to the right place. A place with very strong people. She tells Jinwoo to become Earth's representative in the GSP tournament and calls him the Great Demon Mind Jinwoo. And so, Chapter 3 ends. We begin with Mark looking at all the destruction in that place. He asks himself if this is real. He can't believe it, but looking at the situation, he wonders if Jinwoo might be behind all of it. Someone arrives at the scene, saying that it seems like things changed quite a bit from what he heard. That someone is Virtus, from the planet GSP. He holds the position of judge. Apparently Mark had called him, and said that a resident pixie went out of control and endangered his companions. As Virtus speaks, Mark begins thinking that maybe it was a bad decision, maybe he shouldn't have brought the guy here. Virtus then says that from what he sees, it looks like some third party intervened. He says that if even a pixie, referring to the ones who were defeated, from a Tier 3 civilization was taken down, then it must mean a superior civilization, or one specialized in combat, was involved. He asks Mark if he's right. Mark is confused at first, but then understands. Logically, it would be unthinkable to them that all of this was the work of a human. So he thanks God, because to him, this means he still has time to contact the team leader. Virtus asks him what kind of concerns Mark is having. Mark tries to brush it off, saying he has none. Virtus says no, that Mark was clearly worried about something, and tells him he can't hide it from Judge Virtus. Mark says he understands. After all, he says he can't lie to Judge Virtus. Mark says it's just that he's worried about whether his companions are safe. Virtus tells him they're not, judging by the state of the scene, and says that the suspect is definitely a heinous criminal. Mark just responds, "Right." Virtus tells Mark not to worry. He says that the best investigators on planet GSP are reconstructing the scene. He gestures forward, and we see some kind of machines recreating the event using holograms or something similar. Virtus says that after this, they'll soon find out who was responsible. Mark then looks at it, and wonders if that's the memory specter from the past materializing machine he's heard about. Then he realizes that if he just stands there, and Virtus suddenly activates a power and tells Mark, referring to him as Earthling, not to be so downhearted. Virtus releases an immense blast of power into the sky, one that even breaks through the roof of the building. While doing this, he declares that he, Judge of Justice Virtus, will surely avenge Mark's companions. Mark is stunned by the amount of power. A hole has been blown through the ceiling, and Mark becomes increasingly anxious, thinking to himself that everything there is really bad, and he mentions someone named Lena. 30 minutes earlier, before Mark and Virtus arrived, Rina and Jinwoo, the mad demon, are having a conversation. Jinwoo says that after a certain event, he came to his senses and found himself in that place. Apparently, he told her all about the events that led him to that location. 3,000 years later. Rina processes everything he said. She thinks about martial warrior ceiling, and tells herself that this story sounds like something out of a novel. She reflects that all of it explains how he's now able to speak fluently a language he couldn't before. She wonders if that's the influence of absorbing that picks his power. She keeps thinking, while Jinwoo just stands there, watching her. Rina tells herself she's never heard of a cosmic power that absorbs others' powers. Still, if that's the case, there's no other explanation. She questions how humanity lost those abilities. Perhaps it's like lost technology. Meanwhile, Jinwoo simply turns and starts to leave. Rina notices and tells him to wait. She asks where he's going alone. Jinwoo says that, thinking about it, he doesn't need her help anyway. Rina then shouts for him to wait, that she'll tell him and take him to the place. Jinwoo says he can just look for it on his own. Rina runs to him and begs him to wait a minute, that this isn't the world he once knew. Jinwoo even repeats, "My God, not the world I knew?" and is amazed when a door opens automatically as he approaches it. He tells Rina not to follow him. When Jinwoo steps out, he's met with a crowd of aliens and different species living together in society. He looks around and wonders what those beings are. Rina catches up and touches his shoulder. She says she warned him, and tells him, "Welcome to the 26th century, human from the past." Then we see spaceships flying in the sky. Rena explains that this era is called the Earth Space Exploration Age of the year 2600. Jinwoo asks, "Space Exploration Age?" Rena tells him that, as he can see, it means they've started interacting with civilizations beyond Earth. Jinwoo then asks her what's so special about interacting with those bizarre creatures she had already distinguished before. Rena then says, "Bizarre, you say?" and asks him what he thinks. If he had to classify those creatures and humans based on the level of their civilization, where does he think humans would be? Jinwoo, now with a new look, says he has no idea how many of those creatures even exist, so how could he know something like that? Rena replies, saying there are around 20,000 civilizations in the universe, and dear humanity is at the bottom of the food chain. Jinwoo then asks her if what she's saying is that the bald guy he took down is included too, and if humans are really that stupid. Rena says that's exactly what he said. She admits it, and asks if he could please pay attention to her words. Rena says that, in the universe, there's a 5-tier scale that categorizes the hierarchical relationships of civilizations. As she said, humans are at the lowest level, classified as a Tier 1 civilization. She says that, of course, even among Tier 1 civilizations, humans are at the bottom. Jinwoo looks at her and asks if she actually cares about such a useless classification. Rena then says, "Useless?" Jinwoo replies that, if he were her, he'd focus on gaining strength instead of worrying about that. Rena tells Jinwoo that she's formally proposing again. Jinwoo asks, "A proposal?" and says, "What is this all of a sudden?" Rena asks if what he wants, in the end, is to meet and fight strong beings. She asks if she's right. Jinwoo says yes, that could be considered true. Rena explains that, on the planet they're on, a universal combat tournament is held once every 100 years. She explains that in this tournament, being stronger than anything he could imagine participate. So, he would be representing Earth in this tournament. Therefore, she says, he'd be able to meet the strong beings he longs for. She then extends her hand while speaking, but as she finishes, Jinwoo slaps her hand away. Jinwoo then asks if she's asking him to fight for her. Rena says yes, but that it's so he can meet strong beings. Jinwoo then tells her to shut up. He asks if she thinks she can use him just because they exchanged a few words. Jinwoo asks if, after just a few conversations, he already seems as dumb as she is. Rena says that if it sounded that way, then she'll rephrase it as a request. Rena says that if they do well in the tournament, humanity can advance to the next civilization tier. Jinwoo then asks what the importance of this classification is, and calls it a hollow ranking. Rena gets irritated and says it's not hollow. Jinwoo then asks what it is then, just a matter of climbing a few levels? He asks if her, useless, core will change in any way. And then Rena says, "And what if it does?" Irritated, Rena explains that to advance to the next phase, all he has to do is perform well in that tournament. She says the civilization levels are categorized based on cosmic force, which is a vital energy that quantifies existence. All the powers that defy common sense in this universe only manifest when one can freely manipulate that indescribable energy. Jinwoo then says that now he gets it. He says that she wants to use this mysterious power, but it seems like she can only use it after leveling up. However, he says they, referring to Earthlings in general, have no hope of winning the tournament. Jinwoo then asks if what she wants is for him to fight those monsters for her. Rena says that's the conclusion. But, when a civilization advances, what it gains isn't just a way to use those superpowers, but enlightenment, knowledge you couldn't obtain even after a lifetime of effort. Jinwoo wonders about this knowledge that can't be acquired even after a lifetime. Rena says yes. The knowledge humanity has accumulated up until now, what is believed to be the result of centuries of human effort. But upon reaching the space exploration era, the truth was revealed. What they thought was gained through human experience and effort was nothing but a mere fraction of the information being continuously transmitted by the massive brain of a giant at the end of the universe. Rena says that, after that, there are those who control the giant's knowledge. They are called the N-Sapiens. Rena explains that they are the only Tier 5 civilization in the current universe, and the hosts of that tournament. Knowledge is distributed to each civilization unequally due to their restrictions. Jinwoo simply says, "How boring." He says that, in the end, like he said before, she just wants to use him to get what she wants, asking him to fight. Rena says that's true, but she asks him to listen to what she has to say. She says she has to do this for all of humanity. Jinwoo then turns around and walks away, telling her that instead of explaining, he suggests she find someone who shares her beliefs. He says he doesn't think there's a fool out there willing to risk their life for others. Jinwoo was talking and, out of nowhere, a hand appears aiming for his head. Jinwoo sees that bright light coming at him and turns around. When he looks, it's Virtus. He launched a power straight from his hand that simply caused Jinwoo's body to explode from the stomach to the head. Virtus then says the execution of the sentence is complete. Virtus says he never imagined it would be the doing of a lower-level civilization like Jinwoo's. Here we can tell Virtus probably saw who it was through the hologram, and saw that it was Jinwoo, an Earthling, who caused all the destruction there. Virtus then walks toward Rina. She's completely terrified. Virtus then says that, due to her involvement in the murder case of the resident pixie, he will judge her. He then extends his hand toward Rina. He's about to execute her too, but out of nowhere, Jinwoo is apparently still alive, and he says that really hurt, referring to Virtus's attack. Jinwoo then calls out to Virtus, calling him Tin Head. And then we see, behind Virtus, Jinwoo's half-destroyed body, now reconstructing itself from the stomach up. Rina watches, completely shocked, wondering if he's still alive. Jinwoo, now rebuilding his body, yells at Virtus, calling him a damn bastard and asking what he thought he was doing, leaving Jinwoo in that state. Virtus says nothing, and Jinwoo, with his hand almost fully reformed, tells him not to even think about running away, or he'll make Virtus end up exactly like how he left Jinwoo. The chapter ends with the battle nearly about to begin, Virtus versus Jinwoo the Mad Demon. GSP Planet, District 3, C Street. We see people walking freely through the city, and then we are shown the little girl that Rina and Mark saved. She's telling what happened and that the auntie, referring to Rina, helped her. Grog and Kulak are introduced. Grog asks Mila if Rina fought a pixie. She then says that the Earthlings are braver than the rumors say. Kulak says they need to thank Rina. Someone arrives asking what they're happily talking about without him. Grog then asks if he knew that their youngest almost got into big trouble for going to cheer for him. Then we see that the mysterious person is Panin, the winner of the last battle. Mila runs toward Panin and jumps to hug him. Grog and Kulak approach him. Grog says he went through a lot and asks if Panin is okay. Panin tells him not to worry. He says he's now in fighting condition and asks about what they had said earlier, about big trouble or something like that. At the same time, they see a big explosion near where they are. People scream that Virtus appeared on the street, telling everyone to evacuate. Someone asks what's going on. Another explains that Virtus is chasing an Earthling who killed a pixie and ran away. Grog is confused. Kulak says that combination sounds familiar. Mila grabs Panin's hand, and he asks what's wrong with her. When she is about to explain, he understands immediately. Shouts for everyone to get out of the buildings because one is about to collapse. Chaos ensues in the city, with many structures damaged. Next, we see Rina fallen, looking at some debris in front of her. Then, we see Jinwoo with his power in his hands, saying that this is what happens when someone blows up another person's body without a second thought. Jinwoo is standing on the debris, where Virtus is trapped. However, Virtus releases a big burst of light beneath Jinwoo, who gets annoyed and says it seems Virtus still has some energy left. Virtus then concentrates all his energy to simply destroy the debris and take Jinwoo down the path, but Jinwoo backs off. Virtus then emerges from the debris saying he couldn't believe it when he saw the crime scene. He asks Jinwoo to tell him if he really absorbed the cosmic force of that pixie. Virtus says that Jinwoo is more dangerous than he thought. Our protagonist retorts, asking if Virtus is starting to regret touching him without permission. Jinwoo then concentrates power in his feet and stomps the ground with all his might, using the ability Earth-Splitting Explosion. Jinwoo then announces that, at that moment, it's already too late. More destruction happens throughout the city. People shout to not get caught in the explosion, telling everyone to evacuate fast. Amid this chaos, we see Rina standing, looking at the debris and wondering what the hell Jinwoo is doing, when suddenly she is grabbed by someone who quickly tells her to calm down, saying he's there to save her. We see it's Panin who approaches Rina. Panin shouts to one of his friends, asking why he's there, since Panin told him to get Mila and stay away. Rina wonders who he is and asks if he's not the Piccolo representative, the one Mila was cheering for earlier. Panin complains that no one listens to him, not even after he won the fight, then puts Rina on his shoulders and heads off. Grog shouts to Panin that Mila is with Kulak, so he doesn't need to worry and should move quickly. Rina asks what they're going to do with her. Panin tells her they'll repay the favor from last time. Panin also says that their civilization, the Piccolo, always repays any kindness received. Grog then shouts for Panin to come quickly and points the way. Rina gets confused and tries to ask them to wait a minute. Panin says, however, saving her species mate will be impossible, referring to Jinwoo. He says all judges are monsters who have reached the GSP tournament finals at least once, and that there's no chance Jinwoo will be saved now. Meanwhile, in the battle, we see Jinwoo at full strength going after Virtus. Virtus realizes that the cosmic force of the Pixis isn't his only ace up the sleeve. While Jinwoo is flying toward Virtus, he releases another burst of light at Jinwoo. The burst is so strong it lights up the entire area, visible even from the tops of buildings or from the sky. After that, Virtus finishes his sentence, saying it's all just a trick, and Jinwoo appears from the mist created by Virtus's power. His fists are engulfed in blue flames, and he says he already knew Virtus would say that. As Jinwoo approaches, Virtus anticipates and positions the tip of his finger very close to Jinwoo's head. Virtus's fingertip is charging another burst of power, then releases it, practically hitting Jinwoo's entire body. Virtus says no, saying it seems Jinwoo is really insignificant after all, and more or less carbonizes Jinwoo with his power. Meanwhile, Rina keeps shouting for Panin to let her go. She screams and calls him a damn alien. Rina says that if he's going to save anyone, he should save Jinwoo, not her. Grog asks if she didn't hear what he said earlier. He asks what they're supposed to do against a monster like that, referring to Virtus, and Panin tells Grog to shut up, saying she saved Mila. Grog then yells at Panin, telling him enough of that. He keeps asking how long Panin will keep that outdated belief. Panin tells Grog to be quiet, that it's their civilization's ideal, which has been protected for ages. While Panin is saying this, something burning falls right in front of their path. They both stop, startled, wondering what it is. One asks if it's firewood but quickly realizes it's a body, the body of the earthling Jinwoo, who was being chased by Judge Virtus. Panin then asks if that was him facing Virtus, and if that's the case. Grog shouts that Virtus must also be heading there. Grog shouts to Panin that they can't stay there, that they have to run, even if they have to leave Rina behind. Meanwhile, Jinwoo's body begins to rebuild itself amidst the flames. Grog says that at this rate, they're going to get dragged down too. While Rina watches Jinwoo's bones reconstructing one by one, she laughs a little crazily, and says that was as expected. She then shouts for Panin and Grog to take a good look at Jinwoo's body. Suddenly, Jinwoo starts screaming. Grog asks what that is, if he's alive. Panin just thinks to himself that he can't believe what he's seeing. He says Jinwoo's body is continuously regenerating, even with Virtus's flames. Panin then wonders if the Earthling's cosmic force is regeneration, and concludes that it seems like a power far too valuable for such an inferior civilization. Then Virtus appears behind them. Virtus simply arrives, and tells them to leave the criminals behind and get out of there. Grog asks if Panin heard him, and says this is their chance to get out. Panin asks Rina if she thinks Jinwoo can survive. Grog complains. Rina then says yes, she's seen him recover from worse wounds. Panin says, "Really?" and says they're going to take Jinwoo to the fighter registration office right now. Panin says that if he becomes a tournament fighter, not even Virtus will be able to touch him without reason. Panin calls Grog. Grog tells him not to do that. Panin says that while he holds Virtus off, Rina and Grog should take Jinwoo's still regenerating body to the fighter registration office. Then Panin removes his cloak and walks toward Virtus to face him head-on. Grog just calls Panin a stubborn idiot. Then he grabs Jinwoo's body and runs with Rina. Grog runs shouting to Panin that he doesn't care about anything anymore but to not die. Panin tells him not to worry, that with this victory they'll get a weapon to surprise him. Virtus then speaks. He calls them fools and asks if they really think they can escape Virtus. He points his finger at Grog and the others. A small yellow energy orb is coming from his hand. He's ready to shoot it, but Panin releases some power that extinguishes it. Panin then says he's heard of Virtus, that before he was a judge, he was a Halationian. Panin says the weakness of Halationians, who wield the power of light, is darkness. And while he begins using some abilities to stop Virtus, he says that, by chance, on that very day, the cosmic force of Panin's civilization gained the ability to wield darkness. Then we see Panin completely transformed, looking like a shadow demon. Panin says it's probably the will of his ancestors to protect Mila's benefactors. Meanwhile, at the fighter registration office, a woman says she's sorry, but no matter how many times they say something, and we see Grog and Rina trying to register Jinwoo. Grog tells the woman to stop apologizing and just proceed with the registration, while Rina tells her to see that she is the representative of Earth. The woman says no, because even so, Jinwoo's physical condition. Jinwoo then interrupts her, screaming on the floor, all battered, but saying he's fine and telling her to just hurry up with that damn process. People start asking what all the noise was, what's going on, if all that noise is coming from them, Rina, Grog, and Jinwoo. They then talk to each other, saying it looks like the Earthlings are trying to register for the GSP tournament, but aren't being accepted. A random guy then laughs and asks, "Earthlings? That weak civilization wants to participate?" He says if they face the Earthlings, it will be a guaranteed victory. Others there start laughing. The guy then says they need to help the Earthlings get accepted. Little do they know there's a human who is more demon than man, and is now eager to join. Meanwhile, at the registration, they keep shouting at the woman about what the problem is, and that they have to register Jinwoo now, because they don't have time. Extras behind, trying to take advantage, ask what Kira knows, referring to the woman, is doing, telling her to register them all at once, that all civilizations have the right to participate in the GSP tournament. Another says he's right, and asks if she's discriminating against a low-tier civilization. Grog then asks what those guys are doing. Meanwhile, everyone in the place starts shouting for them to be registered, and Kiranos says alright, she'll do the registration. Rina then says that's great, that she should have done that from the start. Kiranos excuses herself and asks to confirm one thing. She then asks where the young man to be registered is. Both look and see Jinwoo is gone. Rina and Grog are completely shocked and wonder where Jinwoo went. Meanwhile, on G Street in District 3, Virtus says he doesn't understand. While holding Panin's head as if to crush it, he asks what the hell Panin gains by risking his life to help Rina and Jinwoo. Virtus says he can't understand what goes on in the minds of low-tier civilizations. As Virtus is about to finish off Panin, someone arrives and shouts, "Hey, spindly legs!" When Virtus turns to look, guess who? Jinwoo arrives with all his strength. His fist is surrounded by a blue light, and he's going all out against Virtus. Jinwoo says Virtus is going to get crushed now. Virtus sees that and simply says, "I see." Then he says it's no wonder low-tier civilizations always make foolish decisions. He then opens his hand to unleash his light power toward Jinwoo. Suddenly, Panin shouts to Jinwoo that he has temporarily sealed Virtus's abilities and tells Jinwoo to go all out. Jinwoo then charges with full power. He says whether the martial arts are insignificant or not, Virtus can only judge after taking a hit. Then Jinwoo lands a direct strike on Virtus. His armor breaks, and the chapter ends with Virtus finally taking a critical hit from Jinwoo. Meanwhile, in Zone 3, District Z, promotional building, we see Mark all battered, saying it's not his fault. He's sitting, apparently blaming himself for the events. Mark tells himself that if team leader Rina hadn't gotten involved at the start, none of this would have happened. Then an explosion occurs, and Mark is startled. Mark asks what's going on. He wonders if it's a terrorist attack or an accident. Then he notices the explosion and says, "Don't tell me that." With Virtus's helmet ripped off after Jinwoo's strike, Jinwoo then tells Virtus that he's really a tough guy. We see Virtus's serious eyes directed at Jinwoo, who asks if he even endured a serious hit from him. Jinwoo says it's all good, so now he's going to steal Virtus's power. Virtus then lets out a roar of rage. He suddenly adopts another stance and starts shouting that he will never forgive Jinwoo. He begins to concentrate all his power again. Virtus says how dare he scratch the mask that was given to him directly by the divine. Virtus then says he will tear Jinwoo to pieces and calls him an insect. At this, we see Virtus's face. He looks like a kind of modified lion. He is a very specific kind of monster. A hand made of light energy appears above Jinwoo. Jinwoo then asks if that's not exactly what Virtus has been trying and failing to do from the start. Then, at the moment of attack, Jinwoo easily dodges it, but Virtus flies, behind Jinwoo before he has time to react. Jinwoo is still saying that the technique is kind of troublesome. Meanwhile, Virtus's hand manages to reach Jinwoo's head, which is thrown far away at an absurd speed. Virtus is completely pissed off and uses his ability to create a ball of light again, throwing it at Jinwoo, causing another huge explosion. Meanwhile, we see Mark telling someone on the phone that he has arrived at the location. He says that, just as team leader Rina said, that guy is there, referring to Jinwoo. Someone on the phone yells at him, asking if he's sure. We see it's Rina speaking. She says she's relieved to know they're safe. Grog, beside him, asks if Jinwoo has recovered from a wound of that caliber. Mark then says he doesn't think it's time for Rina to be relieved yet, and Rina asks what he means. Mark says Jinwoo is there, but safe is a very strong word. And we see Virtus standing, looking at Jinwoo, right in front of Mark. Virtus says he's surprised. He asks if Jinwoo, who's all crippled on the floor, incinerated, just ashes, can even recover from that kind of damage. Virtus prepares another attack, and says he doesn't know how a low-tier civilization obtains such overwhelming power, but that it will end right there and then. Virtus is about to unleash his final blow, which will reduce Jinwoo to dust. However, someone shouts for Virtus to wait a moment. Virtus immediately stops the attack and sees it's Kiranos shouting at him to stop. He then asks her what's going on. Kiranos says that Terran Jinwoo has been registered as a representative of Earth in the GSP tournament. Apparently, Kiranos is communicating with Virtus telepathically. Virtus then asks what nonsense this is, that he was there the whole time. And Kiranos says it was 30 minutes ago. Then we go to a flashback 30 minutes earlier. We see people calling Kiranos a racist for not registering Jinwoo, some shouting that she must be joking, and yelling for her to hurry up. Kiranos then says there's no chance all that stubbornness will work. She asks them to stop the noise. Grog then asks what she means by that, and calls her a racist. Rina says her job is to register fighters, not to judge who wants to register. She then loses it, and tells them to shut up. Someone in the protesting crowd asks to excuse them. A minor extra asks if there isn't a provisional registration system for when a fighter can't go there in person. Another protester says now that he mentions it, he thinks he remembers something like that. The other asks if it really exists, and how he never heard of it. Kiranos thinks to herself that it's obvious he never heard of it. It's not something made for low-tier civilizations. She then thinks that if she uses it properly, something might work. Kiranos then says she understands and says, "All right." She says if they fill out the documents by hand and hand them to her, she will register them. If Rina can't even do that, then they should just give up and leave. Grog and Rina read it, and Grog shouts for her to wait and asks what that is. He says what's on the paper isn't the universal language. It's all written in the language of a high-tier civilization. Grog then asks how they're supposed to understand those scribbles they call a language. Kiranos asks if they don't know and says, "What a pity." Grog gets irritated and says obviously they don't know, and asks her to give them something in the universal language. Kiranos just says she can't do anything about that. She says the provisional registration system was created for the convenience of superior civilizations, so naturally, it's made in a language only they know. One protester says their plan won't work, and now that he thinks about it, asks why the Terrans are so desperate to register. Another extra beside asks the same. He says if there's no immediate match at the moment, just bring the competitor over there. One protester asks what that sound is. And when he looks, Rina is already writing something on paper. The next panel cuts to Rina holding her head, writing. Grog then asks if she knows the language on the paper. Kiranos also looks surprised and thinks to herself it's impossible. She grabs Rina's paper and says it can't be, that's a bluff. She says there's no way a lower civilization would know that language. Then she starts to ask how a lower civilization like Rina's can read and even write that language. Kiranos says for the mind of a Terran, even the symbols of that language should be hard to understand. It should be impossible for someone from a low-tier civilization. Back to the present, Virtus is still talking to Kiranos. He asks if someone must have secretly helped them. Kiranos says someone among them might have helped, that it's a possibility. But still, she says Rina wrote it with her own hands. With a common language, it would make sense, but the characters of this language look like images, and she has to find the differences between each image and memorize millions of words and entire vocabularies at once. Kiranos says even if she memorized them, she would still have trouble forming sentences. So that means she not only memorized the words, but also every possible sentence structure. Kiranos says that's even more impossible. Even a civilization specialized in languages, like hers, would take a long time to try something like that. And finally, Kyranos tells Virtus that help is not illegal, so they cannot cancel the registration. Kyranos tells Virtus that maybe it's better to leave the judgment for now. Virtus says that's fine, he'll think about it. Virtus then says that first they managed to convince someone to risk their own life to save them, and now a helper secretly taught them the language of the superior civilizations without Kyranos knowing. Virtus looks at Jinwoo's body, which is slowly recovering. Virtus also kind of rebuilds his mask, and says it's as if the universe itself is begging for Jinwoo to be saved. Then Virtus says it's okay, he'll let it go this time, but it seems like he'll need to somehow restrict Jinwoo's little trick. Virtus is then using some ability on Jinwoo, who's lying on the ground. Mark then calls Rina on the phone. He says that Virtus took Jinwoo along with another little trumpet and disappeared. Rina then yells on the phone, "Disappeared?" Grog shouts, asking if Mark just called Panin a little thief. Kyranos asks them to stop the noise. She says the two were simply moved to the competitor's recovery room. Rina or Grog tells Kyranos that she quickly changed her tone, but thanks her, and Kyranos tells them to get out of there quickly. 1 week later, in the competitor's recovery room, Mark and Rina look at Jinwoo inside a recovery capsule. Mark then asks Rina if she really thinks that Walking Rag can compete. Rina tells him not to worry, that Jinwoo will get better quickly. Someone enters the room, saying it's been a while that she keeps claiming that, but to him, Jinwoo seems to be struggling just to stay alive. Then we are shown an old man with 2 robot bodyguards. This old man is the Terran commander Clarice Ive. Clarice says it seems he trusted Rina too much. He says that therefore he will proceed with the originally planned competitor for the match occurring in 2 days. Rina says no, please. She says if he gives a little more time. Someone shouts from behind, telling Rina not to let her emotions get the best of her. He jumps over Clarice and lands in front of them. Then he tells Rina to trust only him. He says to trust the most powerful human on Earth, Marcel Blade. And then we see Earth's original representative, Marcel Blade. And that's when Rina starts pounding on the glass where Jinwoo is, asking him to wake up. Clarice then touches Rina's shoulders and asks her not to worry. He says Marcel is currently the strongest Terran and was personally chosen by him. And he says that, moreover, the suit Marcel is wearing is the pinnacle of all knowledge accumulated by humanity. Clarice then says that after this match, no civilization would ever dare underestimate the Terrans again. And thus, Chapter 6 ends. Like the story? Then leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss anything. Comment what you think, and especially if you want a continuation. Suggestions are always welcome. I'm always watching the comments. Thanks and see you next time.